one of my sayings that I came up with, I don't know, a couple of years ago now, is that correction without connection leads to trauma.
I love that one. Yeah,
And so,
absolutely.
yeah, and I've probably dropped that a few times, but what that actually looks like is that when that person is in their state, when that person is in their dysregulation, that's not the time or place to correct them.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's Remind podcast. My name's David Masterton, and I'm joined by the wonderful, amazing Ashleigh Moreland. How are you going today, Ash?
Hey Dave, I'm well. How are you?
Fantastic. So today's episode, it's going to be a little bit, I think it's going to get everyone. I don't think anyone would not have experienced this in some way, shape or form. We're talking about abandonment.
Yeah.
How that feels, what it means, is it deliberate? Is it just subconscious? All of these things, quite a big topic.
It's huge. The reason this really came up is what I find in my work is things happen in themes. It's really interesting, actually. And the theme over the last couple of weeks has been fathers and daughters with abandonment. So fathers having conversations with me that their daughters are experiencing like mental health challenges, or that there's conflict in the relationship because the daughter feels like they've been abandoned. And the conversations that I've had, that it's amazing because they're almost identical, just with different characters, has been, but I haven't abandoned them. I'm always here. I'll give them whatever they need. I provide for them. I do all these things, all the kind of masculine energy provision things. But the conversation's really amazing because my role in that has really been repeatedly helping these men to see and understand what abandonment is from more of a feminine perspective and in that feminine energy. Because it's very rarely about provision. You can have all the provision of all the practical things in the world and still be feeling abandoned. And that creates a huge amount of conflict because the man's like, but I'm giving you everything. Why don't you feel like I love you? Why do you feel like I've abandoned you?
And look, to be fair, coming from someone who was very much in that mode, you don't know any better. And so when you don't actually have, and so I suppose what we're talking about from your point of view is the daughter's probably feeling emotionally abandoned.
Yeah.
And so trying to connect with someone, and I'll go back to my previous experience, who's not emotionally connected to themselves, i.e. dad with dad or David with David, then there's no way I can be emotionally connected to anyone. If I've got the most ability to connect with anyone, it'd probably be my children.
Yeah.
But if I'm not connected to myself, there's only a very small limit. And when the kids come in, there's no boundaries, there's no limitations. They're just there ready to learn and soak up exactly what you're putting out there and what you're modeling.
Yeah.
But from a dad's point of view, what is connection? I give you a cuddle, I sit on your knee, or they sit on my knee. There's that connection, there's that protection. There's that I'll do things for you. I will drive you here. I will show up. I will do these type of things. But it's still from if I can't connect with myself, you're only getting as deep as I can get with myself, period.
Yeah, and that's really interesting because the examples you just gave then, and maybe this is reflective of the fact that we still have relatively young kids. Neither of us are really raising the adolescents yet. And interestingly, all the conversations that I had were with fathers of adolescent girls. And the age range has been from 14 to about 22 or thereabouts. And that is a really vulnerable time. It's a really vulnerable time for any human, but in particular, it's a really vulnerable time for females. And there's a bit of misconception here because a lot of people will just blame hormones. They're hormonal. They're going through puberty.
Oh, look, it plays a role, but it's not the whole story. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing. So it's a little bit of an education piece around, well, hormones absolutely play a huge role. Puberty is massive, but we can't blame puberty for everything, because puberty and adolescence are not the same thing. So adolescence isn't just hormones. Adolescence is actually a neurological process. And during adolescence, our brain kills off millions of neurons. And we kind of go from this really generalist brain that's really wired for connection to our caregivers and attachment to our caregivers, because our survival literally depends on it. And during adolescence, what happens is our brain starts to kill off millions of neurons at a pretty rapid rate, so that we can, first of all, start to kill off some of those attachment networks, simply because we're becoming more independent. And if we are still as attached at 30 as we are at 7, then we probably got some problems.
Well, you'd never seek a relationship outside your parents.
And no other relationships outside of caregiver relationships, no friendships. There's no differentiation. So we call this process differentiation. And when there's been attachment wounding, that differentiation process kind of gets muddled up. And so we become really codependent and enmeshed. But the reason this adolescent period is so tricky is because neither brain is fully functional. So we sort of flip between this really needy, attached child brain and this adult brain that's in development that wants independence and wants, like, leave me alone and I want space and I've got my own life and you're not the boss of me kind of stuff. But there is still that vulnerable child at the same time, and it's like walking a tightrope. And when it comes to these conversations, I think that's the hardest thing to navigate, is there has to be a little bit of awareness around what's going on in the mind and brain of that adolescent. They're unpredictable for a reason. Like, there's a biological reason for that. But if we can have greater understanding of what's going on for them, then we might be able to see things through their lens and go, well, I feel like I haven't abandoned you, but let me step into your shoes just for a moment. What might that abandonment actually look like? What might you be seeing that could be perceived as abandonment?
Whether you can relate to it or not, I think this is the biggest thing. Because you can, when you say I haven't abandoned you or I don't feel that, it's based on the way I perceive the situation.
Yeah. And then that becomes gaslighting, because I could be sitting here going, oh, I feel so abandoned. I feel like I don't even matter to you and you don't even love me. And they sit there and go, yes, I do. Don't be stupid. I haven't abandoned you, which then invalidates what you're feeling and fractures your sense of self and connection to self, because it says, well, I don't know what to trust. This is what I'm feeling, but you're saying that I don't feel that, and that's not true and not what happened. So what do I trust here?
And 9 times out of 10, because I've got to leave a little wiggle room for me being wrong, but 9 times out of 10, it's no, you don't feel that way, and here's why. Number one, I'm sitting in front of you. Yeah. If I was abandoning you, I wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
Who made your dinner last night? Who took you to school? Who all
the justification.
Right? And then suddenly they're going, well, okay, not only do I feel abandoned, I now feel stupid. And completely misunderstood, and I just want to go away and, not be around you.
Yeah.
And by God, if I ever bring it up again, isn't that going to be a problem?
Yeah. It's invalidating.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's difficult because, again, coming from a dad, when a child says, you're not doing ... put in anything you want there is a part of me that sort of goes, well, you're being ungrateful at the moment because, geez, if you only knew what ... meant, there's a lot of things that, I don't hear you complaining when I'm doing all these other great things.
Yeah.
And so there's that balancing act of going, well, look, I really do need to show you're being ungrateful.
Yeah.
Versus actually validating every single emotion. Because that in itself could be, well, if I let you, If I validate every emotion without giving you the ability to see an opposite as to what you're feeling, then simply you just go, I'm not parenting you. I'm not helping you to become an adult that understands the societal norms, whether you agree with societal norms or not. Is it unfair that you have to get up and go to school? Probably, if you don't want to. But do you have to in this society? Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
Because there's things that you need to go through. Because otherwise you pop out at the end of it going, all those lessons you should have learnt at school, probably more social than say, yes, reading, writing is important. But you have to start learning all of that when you pushed out into the world after you finished homeschooling.
Yeah. I think something even there that I see, and this is such a tiny nuance, and it's something that plays out in our home actually quite a bit, which we're working on. Again, another representation that we can know this, but applying it and living it is a different story. So it's that embodiment and integration of what we know. And something that I would encourage is like, you're right that there is a necessity sometimes to be able to teach them and flex their muscle of being able to see things from a different point of view as well. But one of my sayings that I came up with, a couple of years ago now, is that connection without correction without connection leads to trauma.
I love that one. Yeah.
And so, and I've probably dropped that a few times, but what that actually looks like is that when that person is in their state, when that person is in their dysregulation, that's not the time or place to correct them or to justify. First thing, the first thing that has to happen is connection. Connection is empathy. It's emotional presence. Connection doesn't just look like sitting in the same room on your phone. That's not connection.
That's proximity.
Exactly. And connection and proximity are not the same thing. So absolutely, I agree. And I actually think that if we got so much better at connecting emotionally and energetically, our capacity to correct and their willingness to receive that correction in a way that's not triggering or traumatic will skyrocket. Because then the conversation is coming from a place of safety, presence, connection, love. How much more beautiful does that experience of correction feel, as opposed to being invalidated, as opposed to being told you're wrong and why, and as opposed to all these things. So I think
it's a difference, but like you're sort of saying, supportive. And I think when we're focusing on the child and we're focusing on like the child parent, if you're not emotionally connected to the child, everything will feel like there has to be a bridge somewhere. Who's bridging that? And if there's no bridge, then you're not really connecting. So everything feels a bit harder, feels a bit more difficult, or the bridges that are used are coping mechanisms that then have to be undone when they join the Rise and Thrive, sort of thing in the future, because suddenly you're used to a certain dynamic where you had to fill in a part where connection should have been.
Yeah, and it's that disintegration. So disconnection also leads to disintegration. And so what's the road to healing? The road to healing is connection and integration. So it's absolutely profound. And I think when we come back to the topic of abandonment in all of this, it's so important to understand what connection actually means. Because abandonment is related to emotional, energetic, and present connection. But from the practicality, masculine side, not abandoning someone. If I asked 10 people, I've actually asked quite a few people in the last week because I've been having these conversations, but if I asked 10 people, what would abandonment look like? 9 times out of 10, men will say leaving.
Well, I mean, that's the easiest way to say, what does abandonment mean?
Yeah. If I ask the same question to their wives or their daughters or their partners, anyone, the feminine energy in this or the feminine in this, it's they left me alone when I was upset. They tried to fix things instead of just being with me. They didn't listen to me. They weren't present with this. They saw a need and didn't meet it. Or it's those the seemingly smaller, insignificant things. That's what leads to people feeling abandoned. It's communication breakdown. How many people have a partner who is physically there but feel alone in their relationship? Like, oh, I just got goosebumps.
And how many of these things can you see in the moment versus retrospectively? Because as you're talking about all of that, like there's no way known I could be having this conversation with a 5-year-old. Because when they say, apart from abandonment having a few too many syllables, right, in the word, it's a big, big word. How would they even know? Like you'd ask your child, when do you feel alone? Well, when there's nobody around.
Yeah.
Right.
But it's not about logic and rational thinking there, because they don't have the construct for that yet, but
Exactly.
they know how they feel in their body.
That's right.
So it then manifests behaviorally, doesn't it? Because then they will behave in such a way to seek connection.
Well, they'll just want to cuddle. They'll want to be near you. They'll want to sit on top of you.
But how will they get that?
They'll
get it through maybe a tantrum. They might get it through people pleasing and perfectionism. Like my daughter used to really concern me with this, because she used to go to her dad's house and clean his house. Like I'm talking at 4 or 5 years old, she would go to his house, clean his toilets, clean his house, and he would praise her for that. But my concern was, if this is her attempt to reach out for connection, I don't want her at such a young age to feel like that's the way that she needs to get it. And even with me at home, like she, at our place, she would go above and beyond. She'd clean her room. She'd she would perform to get attention and connection. And the crazy thing is that just today I was like, there's a part of me that misses her cleaning her room without even being asked, but I've really put a lot of effort into connecting with her emotionally and being emotionally and energetically present with her. And the performance behaviors start to dissipate once there's that safe connection.
And again, this is awareness, because you can imagine you and I talking about this 10 years ago.
I wouldn't be having this conversation 10 years ago.
But you know what I mean? Imagine this, someone's telling you about this daughter that just, wherever she goes, she loves to clean.
Yeah, and what does society say? Oh my gosh, what a good girl you are. You're such a good girl. Oh, your mum and dad must be so proud. So what?
And aren't they great parents?
She's seen, she's heard, she's validated. Her worth is so tied to this external circumstance and validation.
And then forward project that behaviour unchanged to a 21-year-old that's then sitting there talking to her dad going, I feel abandoned. You abandoned me. Well, what? What do you mean? You were happy. I thought you loved cleaning. I thought you loved doing all of that. I was always there. All you need to do was ask. So without this awareness piece, we simply don't know.
Yeah.
And it comes back to something I was quoted before. This came back from marriage counselling with my first marriage. Because one of the discussion points was, me personally, as David, I haven't changed. But my wife at the time had changed. And she had changed around the behaviours, or the way she used to behave around the things that I used to do. And I never changed what I did. But her reaction started to change. And when we deep dived into that, the counsellor sort of said, just because she accepted it before does not give you the right to keep on doing it.
Yes.
There has to be an evolution. It's like,
we're going back to our conversation around tolerance versus acceptance.
And so here I am going, well, I've always done the same thing. Clearly there must be a problem with the other person.
Yeah.
When in actual fact, maybe there was tolerance. There was a lot more tolerance than should have been afforded at the time, and it changed. And so, again, it's like when you're talking to a parent, okay, that behaviour that I tolerated before, I didn't see it as I didn't see it as being tolerated.
Yeah.
I saw it as accepted. It's like it's normal. Breathe in, breathe out. These behaviours are fine. So again, as a parent, if the child is being tolerant or using ways to cope through abandonment wounds, and you place it as a parent as being normal, it's not because you're a shit parent. It's not because you're a bad parent.
Yeah.
It's simply because you're just not aware of it, and they're not expressing it, and you're not aware of it because of the way you were modeled by your parents and parents and parents and parents and parents and parents. Again,
and now we're back into the intergenerational train.
And we are all learning this stuff together at the same time, just at different parts of our lives.
Yeah, totally.
So I think the gaslighting, and again, it's not doing it because you're doing it on purpose to manipulate the children. It's what you were told as a kid, right?
It's lack of awareness, and it's really confronting. It's really confronting to face the reality of, oh my gosh, I absolutely abandoned my children, and I had no idea I was doing it. It's so confronting. Do you know, this is how pre-trauma aware Ash and pre a lot of healing Ash, when I was a very behavioralist approach, and it was just do whatever needs to be done in order to get compliance. Mm-hmm. And lack of compliance really triggered me, and it brought up shame and, I must be a bad mum because my children don't listen and all this sort of stuff. One day, my daughter, oh my gosh, she must have been maybe 3. Maybe 3. And she would not get in the car. Like, threw herself on the ground, would not get in the car, out the front of school, and wouldn't listen to get in the car. And if I tried to pick her up, she'd crack it. And I said, I'm going to drive off. And guess what I did? I got in the car and I drove about 15 meters down the car park thing. But the look on her face and the fear that came over her body when I drove away, I had obviously never had any intention of actually leaving her, but I didn't know how else to control her to comply with what I wanted her to do so that we could go home. And so in my lack of resources and in my lack of awareness and understanding of trauma, that was what I did. And guess what? She got in the car. So I was like, Mum win. Excellent.
Super compliant now. Try it again.
Super compliant now. Absolutely. Super compliant now. If I look back on that now and go, how could I have handled that differently? Well, rather than being so focused on behavioral compliance and obedience, how about I focus on connection? And I would get down on the ground with her and I would just go, I'm here. Because children are chaotic. That's how their brain operates. Everything is new and it is chaotic. And if we can just co-regulate with them, if we can connect with them, then the correction can come. Maybe she was seeing something I wasn't seeing in the situation. Maybe she didn't want to go home because, I don't know,
Well, how regulated was Mum during this whole thing?
Oh, I mean Mum was totally triggered by the misbehaving little child. Absolutely. So we talk about abandonment wounds. Oh my goodness. That is legitimately abandonment in the physical and emotional and every sense, energetic sense. But you can't, like, I have completely released guilt and shame over that. And because you can't go back and change it.
No.
All I can do is, yes, when I had awareness of what I had done and the impact that had on her, that was really hard to face. That's confronting. But you can't go back and change it. So what I can do is learn from it and go, okay, so how would I respond differently now? Connection first, always.
And I think most parents are like that. It's sort of I remember I used to do the same thing. I was absolutely, you will behave as a child, 2, 3, 4. I remember I would ask Darcy, my eldest daughter, to take her bag from the house to the car before going to daycare. She would crack it. I remember one day just standing at the front door for 40 minutes, just waiting it out. And I look at that now and go, would I do that same thing with this knowledge? Absolutely not. Was I doing what I thought was the best at that point in time? Because, I thought...
It's like a fixation on winning against a child, isn't it?
Absolutely. Well, it's more about the thing at the forefront of my mind is that I'm the boss and I'm not going to let you control some of the simple things that need to happen. And again, I'd projected that all it was about her trying to win against me about not taking the not take the bag to the car because she wanted me to do it for some unreasonable reason. And that was all my projection. And so been there, done that, and it's just remarkable to see it. And I guess the really big thing to drum home, most parents, once they know, they go, oh, man. Because the awareness piece and what's happening with society is a lot of more of these things are becoming aware. And it's a 180 to what we've been told. You talk about the I'll leave without you. I don't know people in my age group, and I'm sounding old when I say that hasn't heard that from their parents.
Yeah, probably.
Right? It's sort of like, I'll leave without you. You're being too slow, I'll leave without you. And I remember I used to drag my feet going to school because I loved going to school. I loved it. So much that my parents put me into boarding school. So, and I remember I used to drag my feet going to school, and my mum would say, because bless her, she used to drive us every day during primary school, I'll leave without you. We're going in a minute. If you're not done, I'll leave without you. Because I used to drag it, hoping for her one day to go, you know what, David, you're not ready. Don't worry about going to school. Just stay home. And then I remembered one day when it actually, it twigged, right? Because I used to hear, she used to get in to start the car. And then, she's going to leave without me. And so I'd run down. And then I remember one day it clicked. And I went, hang on. If she leaves without me, I don't have to go to school. Beautiful.
Yeah.
And so from there on, it stopped working. But I do remember, because of that, it actually left quite an impression on my twin sister at the time. And she never got to that point of accepting, well, if I'm at home by myself, that's okay. It was this, and it wasn't about her being left. It was that sort of abandonment, but it was the constant repetition in the environment that wasn't necessarily caused by her. And so, again, if my mum had known that at the time, she wouldn't have used that, but she was doing what she needed to do to get the job done. And I guess this whole abandonment thing is you only know as much as you know.
Yeah, and not only that, so it comes back to our previous episode on capacity versus capability, because the capability side is, do I have the tools and resources? Do I know better? But there's also a really relevant conversation around capacity, because do you know what? I have the tools and I have the skills and I have the resources. And I would say a solid 95% of the time now, I also have the capacity to implement and utilize the tools and resources that I have. There is still a fraction of time when I do not have the capacity to actually use the tools and resources that I have. And that's when it's like breaking point, mum. And that still occasionally happens. I mean, I'm struggling to recollect the last example of when that happened, but it absolutely still happens. So from that perspective, it's about going, okay, do we have the tools and resources and knowledge and awareness around what abandonment might look or feel like? And this also brings in a conversation around the fast and furious versus slow and curious brain, because the defensiveness, the justification, the invalidation, those behaviors are really self-preservation behaviors. And if we gave up that necessity to self-preserve for our own survival just for a moment and put our child's needs at a higher priority, we might get curious, and that requires the front parts of our brain. That requires the slow and curious brain networks. So that looks like just pausing and going, what might be going on for them right now? If I were to see things through their eyes, what might they be seeing that I'm not privy to? And so, you know, a perfect example is one of the people I was speaking to was saying it might be weeks between contact with their child. And even though they think of their child all the time, the child doesn't know that. And as from the child's perspective, it's, oh, well, I haven't heard from dad in weeks, so obviously he's having an amazing life and doesn't miss me and doesn't care about me, and therefore I've been abandoned. Now, is that reflective of reality? No, but through their structure of reality and the limited evidence that they can see, 100% that's true for them. And so if we can start to understand what other people's truth is, then we might be able to go, based on their perspective, how might I show up differently so they were feeling really seen, heard, and valued?
Yeah, and it's sort of like this whole thing, everything we talk about, it's like the rules are changing completely.
Yeah.
Like my parents are boomer parents, right? They were raised by parents that dealt with World War II.
Yep.
So let's just go back to my parents being the kids and their parents being the parents, right?
Yeah. Back to a time when peace was achieved by bombing.
Yeah, well,
We're still living in those times.
That's right. That's exactly right. And men came back, and women came back from the Second World War scarred, not just physically, but emotionally and everything. Mm-hmm. So what did abandonment look like during those times for like the boomer parents, like the parents, the kids that were the boomers that then turned into parents? What did abandonment look like for them? Well, it was a reasonably a household where you weren't mentally and physically abused. It would be the parents were together, and like the whole concept of what does abandonment mean, because like every child that turns into an adult, they're going to look at what their parents did and go, I want to do these bits better.
Yeah.
And they'll focus on certain things. And
most.
Also,
let's go with most.
Okay, I'm the optimist.
Yeah.
And also take on some of the things that they loved their parents doing and, you know, continue that. And then you start to look at, okay, so what does abandonment look like for them? Well, again, you're only as connected to others as you are to yourself. And you were raised by people who suffered horrendous experience, you know, during wartime, Cold War, all of that. And then suddenly you've got your kids coming through that are now, you know, say 40-ish, and going, I felt abandoned. And it's like, well, shit, I did the best I could.
Yeah, but do you know the really interesting thing is it's so rarely the case. I have people asking me, are we raising a generation of soft kids?
Well, compared to, you can imagine this kind of thinking back in the 40s, it'd be...
It wouldn't have fitted.
It wouldn't have even...
The level of consciousness that was present at the time was the level of consciousness that probably was suitable for the world at the time.
Facilitated a Second World War.
Yeah. But having said that, I really believe, especially since COVID, that we are amidst a conscious revolution. I wrote about this. I contributed to a book on the conscious revolution. And what that means is that the programs and the parenting styles and the head in the sand and stress response, survival response approaches to doing life are not going to fly.
Absolutely.
And there's an acknowledgement. I had the absolute honor and privilege recently of hanging out with a woman in her 90s. We had a cuppa and it was absolutely beautiful. And just through conversation, I said to her, what would you have done differently back then as a mum, knowing what you know now? And she pondered it for a moment. She said, I would have been more present with my kids. I would have spent time with them. I would have asked them questions. I would have been curious about how they were feeling and what they were doing. And the most remarkable thing is I know multiple generations in this family, and the child of this woman in her 90s, that's what they needed. Now, does that, the fact that they didn't get it, the fact that there were so many circumstances, absolutely. There were so many circumstances. There were many children. There were many circumstances out of their control that really was a state of survival. But beneath all of that, beneath the circumstance, we're still humans with a soul. We're still humans with nervous systems that are wired for connection. And that doesn't go away just because society says that we bomb for peace.
Yeah. Or we bomb for territory.
Well, yeah, and to be right and to have authority and all these things. So
I guess it's really coming down to this whole abandonment piece is if you felt abandoned, you're not wrong. If you're accusing someone of abandoning you, there is a high likelihood they didn't know any better. There's obviously outlying examples where people would do it deliberately. But we'll talk about, again, I'm being the optimist, right? People aren't aware. And so for people who are trying their best but still get accused of abandoning, and that can be triggering because they're like, I did the best that I could. Again, just sort of know if you didn't have a deep connection, like you can know yourself. There's a difference between self-confidence and knowing yourself.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it's like the
one
true
is authenticity and vulnerability. And I sort of describe it as, just with a client just today, we described it as underneath a callus, there is soft, tender skin. Yeah,
okay.
Now the callus
gruesome
and the soft, tender skin is both you, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think it is a gruesome example, but I think it's a really cool example because the confidence is the callus. That's confidence that's come about from experience and exposure and hurts and all those kinds of things. Yeah. But knowing yourself is really what's beneath the callus. It's the soft, the vulnerable, the stuff that is being protected.
And so if you have felt abandoned as someone, and especially in this day and age where we're just sort of we're breaking light onto it, it's finally just happening. Like this wasn't talked about, apart from in really big traumatic world events or things like that, everyday sort of stuff. It's sort of like this bit about being abandoned wasn't a household common thing. Now it's becoming a lot more because I think there's this sort of shift, this change, this awareness, the consciousness that is all changing. It's almost, I would say, impossible to find someone living right now that will not feel or be accused of abandoning.
Yeah.
Because it's like someone's just turned the lights on and we've gone, oh, wow. So it's not a bad thing. It's going to be a bad thing if you keep on pushing against it and trying to prove people know they're wrong, as opposed to being curious, as opposed to sort of going, okay, well, look, chances are that is the case, but I didn't know any better. Or actually, yes, I did feel abandoned, but that's okay because the people at the time did or didn't know what they were doing.
Yeah.
Because we're course correcting now.
Absolutely. And perception correction. Perception correction. I think maybe that could be our next episode is looking at that perception correction and really going a little bit deeper into that side of things.
Love it. Perception correction. Say that 5 times really fast. All right. That's the abandonment. I guarantee it's probably not the last time we're going to talk about it because, I mean, a lot of these themes seem to be interrelated, but Again, guys, if you come across this and you've felt as though that you've been drawn to it because you've felt abandoned or you've been accused of it and you're curious about it, just know it's okay. When you aren't aware of it and it happens, it gives you the ability to do something about it when you get that awareness. But stay curious, keep on going, and try not beat yourself up, or try not to, like Ash said before, justify your actions. It's just move forward. Understand that you're becoming a more healed version of yourself.
Well said.
Thank you. All right. Until next week.
Bye.
Bye-bye.